coming up on today's show. But this week, right here on BBC Radio Leicester, we have been talking about the rising cost of living, from food to fuel to, from food to fuel, right the way to transport. It comes amid the steep rise in the cost of living, with prices going up at their fastest rate in nearly 30 years. Soaring food costs and the energy bill crisis drove inflation to 5.4% in the 12th month to December, up to 5.1% the month before. Now, the government says it understands the pressures people are facing with the cost of living, and it will continue to listen to people's concerns. Now, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, says the government's providing support worth about £12 billion this financial year, and next is to help families cope with that. So what can we do to try and save and become a little bit more economical? Do you actually know what it takes to leave your bank account what actually leaves your bank account every month? Are you on top of the little charges and subscriptions that you may have forgotten about? How do all of those little £5 a month subscriptions add up? And what can you do to save, especially when you want to splash out? Well, Emma Franklin-Keogh is from Clockwise. A very good morning to you, Emma. Tell us, what are the first things we should be thinking about when trying to make our money go just a little bit further?
One of the first things that we always say is to set yourself a budget. And I know it's one of those very boring things that nobody likes to do, but it is so important in making sure you can stretch your money as far as you can. There is a simple framework. There's the old one, which is it's known as 50-30-20, where you have 50% of your income for needs, 30% for what you want, and then 20% aside for savings and debt repayment. Now, nowadays, that's not always the easiest to do, but the best place to start is work out what you've got coming in, what you've got coming out. And then once you've got that, you're looking at what you've got going out, and you can see, like you said, where all those little things that you could save on are. Check out things like your utility bills. Are you on the best tariff available for your utility bills, for your insurances? There's lots of places online where you can go and compare prices and get the best deal for you. And also, don't forget, when you are setting your budget, the little things that are essential, but you don't think of as essential. Put a little bit aside for things like clothes, new clothes, pairs of shoes. I mean, I've got a daughter myself. If at the rate my child gets through shoes, I have to make sure I put some money aside for that. So it's things like that which can mount up, the little things that you need to keep an eye on. And the beginning of that is setting yourself a realistic budget based on your income and expenditure.
It's just what you say there, Emma. Sometimes it is those little costs that you don't really account for. I can confess my daughter has had 3 shoes this year already, and I just can't believe it. But sometimes it's those things that you don't necessarily plan for. But can you budget for those things? Like would you call it like a miscellaneous expense?
Well, yes, it's kind of it's within that. You've got. That's why, and I know it's a very broad brush, so to speak, the 50-30-20. But that's why you've got to make sure that you can. Just a tiny little bit a month helps. You won't £5 a month set aside, and then 5 months down the line you've got £25. Now, it doesn't seem a lot, but it is enough to get maybe a cheaper pair of trainers if your child's run through their plimsolls at school, or books, or the little things that you need. And when you think of larger items, so there is a lot of information out there, and it's quite a well-known statistic, is that a majority of people now don't have £300 in a savings account if the washing machine breaks down. And if your washing machine breaks down, it's a bit of a nightmare to get a new one. So if you are finding yourself having to look at getting credit, one, make sure that credit is affordable and is at a decent rate if you can do that. And secondly, when you budget, make sure that within your budget, again, you're starting from the beginning. You're looking at the money that you've got coming in, the money you've got going out, and what's not that's affordable.
One thing I used to do actually was keep hold of my receipts and be really intentional about when I go to the shop. If I grab a coffee or, I don't know, pick up a random pair of socks or something, I always made sure I kept my receipts, because sometimes I didn't actually realise that I was spending money until I was actually faced. Is practical stuff like that also quite helpful?
Yes, and make sure that a lot of banks, we have a savings goal feature on our app, and a lot of other banks have exactly the same thing, that you can use that to track through your savings. Online banking has made things a lot easier for people to be able to immediately look at what they're spending and get notifications back. Again, keep your receipts, but a lot of it, when it comes to the cost of living rises, it is making sure that you are on the best deals you can be. So again, make full use of those comparison websites and make sure that you're getting your utilities and your priority bills. They're called priority bills for a reason. They're the ones you really want to focus on, and making sure they're paid and they're at the best price they can be.
What would you say is a good way to decide whether a regular payment that you're making is worth it? I mentioned earlier about, sometimes there are subscriptions that we have, things that we sign up to. Sometimes we've forgotten about them. Sometimes we actually use them. But is there a rule around, deciding whether something is actually worth it or not?
I think it's that difference between a want and a need. So there are things that you need. You need the roof over your head. You need food, you need to allow for new clothes and things like that. Then you're moving on to your wants. So you might want a cup of coffee in the morning, but, is it better to get, and it's better for the environment, a good old mug and take a heated mug into work with you or wherever you need to go. However, if you're budgeting for those wants, then again, it's not a bad thing. Everyone's allowed to treat themselves every so often, but it's whether or not that's set within your budget.
I think that really is the key thing there, making sure you have a budget, that if you are, and I guess with the way the world has been going and self-care and things like that, people probably are spending a little bit of money on just the simple things, whether it's a gym membership or something like that can help.
Yeah.
You probably could go for a walk, but is being in a gym something that would benefit your, the environment of training? Is that a better environment for you? So I guess it's if you're budgeting for it, then absolutely. In terms of habits, are there any other habits that we kind of need to embrace and bring on board that will help when it comes to, making sure we're saving a bit more money?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people, and as a habit, a lot of people, and I think it's one of those things, you never talk about money or politics at the dinner table. We are kind of somewhat scared of our own finances, and sometimes I nicknamed it ATM roulette when I was a student. You go put your card in, just put in a number and hope it came out at the end of it. But you've got to know what's there to be able to. You've got to be brave. I think that's the best way of putting it. You've got to look. You've got to know what's there, because if you're not being brave and you're not being realistic, then you're never going to get on top of your finances. You've got to be brave, you've got to be realistic, and just go in there and deal with it. And it's not the most fun thing to deal with. It can be scary. It can be, it can be embarrassing to talk about, but the more open we are with it, the easier it is to solve, and the less of a stress it becomes on you, because you know what's there. There's nothing worse than that horrible feeling when you're looking at going on, like I said, I've just mentioned the ATM, going on to your ATM, looking what you've got in your bank and it not being what you wanted, because you've not checked and you've not looked, and it becomes overfacing at that point. Be brave, make sure you're checking it, and make sure you know what's there.
That's such fantastic advice. I mean, yeah, it is that case of being face to face with your current situation and not being intimidated by it. And if you don't know, how will you make changes to benefit it? Thank you so much. Emma Franklin-Keogh from Clockwise, thank you so much for your time this morning.